Welcome, everyone, to our topic for today, which is computer security trends for attorneys and law offices. This is a lecture provided for the Center of Continuing Education, and my name is Russell Jackman. And just a quick little information about my background is that I've been a law technology and computer consultant attorney for the majority of my career, which has been over 30 years now. And I have been a member of the Law Practice Management and Technology section of the State Bar of California in the mid to late 90s, going to the early 2000s. And I also wrote a book on internet research for law offices, which was published by the CEB back in, again, the very early 2000s. And so I've seen a lot of trend. I think it's always important to look at where the trends are going and why that's important for attorneys, because of the fact that as attorneys, we are ethically required by the ABA rules to adhere to the practice, the trends and changes that affect our practice in a material manner. And as attorneys spend more and incorporate more technology into their practices, what affects technology affects their practices. And so we're going to talk about some of that today here. So trends in computer security in the mid 2020s. Artificial intelligence and machine learning is sort of the new buzzword, and attorneys hear so much about it. And certainly ones that aren't involved in the technology don't really understand what AI really means. But you've seen it develop in small ways here and there, left and right around you, whether it's a matter of those terrible voicemail systems that, talk to you on the phone when you try calling for help somewhere, and they get you misrouted to all sorts of places. But it's happening in banks, and it's happening in finance, and it's happening in all these other, grocery stores and in fast food places, because they're all trying to find a way to shortcut the kind of mental thinking that we all have to do and have to, put the labor into. Having a computer check everything that's ever been written about something, or that's ever been said or produced or related to a specific subject, and to do that all in a second and give you the results of all of that. Plus, as AI is supposed to work, it's supposed to meld all those things and give you a product. So a lot of people are thinking that AI may replace attorneys at one point in time because of its way of taking legal language and just melding it all together into a legal argument that you just present in front of a judge, who at some point in time may be an artificial intelligence thing itself too. So we may get stuck in that loop. It does get to a point of some very esoteric what ifs, and of course I could spend the entire hour just talking about that, but there's other things I want to talk about. But it's an amazing tool, and it's a double-edged tool, and we'll talk about how it works both ways. These technologies can help law firms stay ahead of cyber criminals by detecting unusual patterns and predicting potential threats. Another trend in computer security, obviously, is identity management. As it gets tougher, as these artificial intelligence means get more intelligent, the ability to fake something and to just totally get through the authenticity level of a particular subject becomes very, very difficult. So, it certainly, the days of when people used to cut a piece of paper of somebody's signature and try taping it and then Xeroxing it to make it seem like they signed something. That that has gone away. And with electronic signatures and with people being able to Photoshop so many different things in such a high level. I mean, on the one hand, that's what we want with technology. We want to get technology to a point where it looks seamless, it looks perfect. It doesn't all look like somebody cut and paste something from, you saw how people were managing their photos in the early like 2000s, and there'd be, a face cut out of a person's face cut out of a family portrait or something like that. There'd be a big blank spot. I mean, now they really, that they can change an image so much. There's absolutely seamless, and no way you could tell that person wasn't in the picture to begin with. And that's both what we want, but it's also what we dread, because being able to then manage an identity and be able to prove who is really you, and was that something that really happened, is that an actual depiction of something that occurred, is going to be a huge question for attorneys, for judges, for law offices, all of that. And so, and that's not even going on the same lines of things like passwords and retina scans and thumbprints and all the other types of identity management elements that are out there. It's going to be, how can you prove you are who you are without someone else being able to use those same things and use those against you? So that's a huge concept, and it's behind everything that all these other things are headed towards. So, I just trying to give you a greater overall scope of what I'm trying to talk about here when we talk about computer security trends. Now, startups are providing solutions to help law firms secure and manage user identity, access rights, and track user activity. So you definitely have a situation where there's an opportunity there, and law firms can look into how you have these specialized companies that will help them achieve these things. Now, law firms have to vet those and make sure that they've got a good reputation and they know what they're doing. And then the other side of it also is that, are they themselves keeping up on all these trends and making sure that all this stuff is being taken care of. So continuing on computer security trends, one of them, is increased dependency and reliance on cloud computing. Okay, so cloud computing is really, it's a great thing in the sense that you have the ability to share massive amounts of information. I mean, I was reflecting on this the other day, actually, which I find kind of interesting. It is interesting that while most of us have files now where our 100 megs, 200 megs, or a gig in size, or even a couple gigs in size when you talk videos and such, that most people's personal emails are still limited to about a 25 meg limit per email. And everyone has to, either use a Dropbox service or OneDrive or Apple Drive or Google Drive, and ship it all off that way instead of actually just using it as an email attachment. And that's sort of what has moved people so much to the cloud, because email, just for whatever reason, hasn't been extended, while the rest of the world has moved past that 25 meg per email limit. as far, I mean, now you can almost maybe not even get a super high res picture in a single 25 meg email. And so the clouds become more important than ever. If you're not going to be stuck having to bucket brigade file by file by file to everybody. And so people are used to it, and they're used to using Dropbox, and they're used to using, there's so many different ways and means to use cloud computing that to not use it at this stage is kind of ridiculous, unless you're truly a sole practitioner that wants to be chained to your office 24/7 and never get a chance to get a break from it. Or when you leave your office, whatever happens to your office while you're gone, you have no control of. And certainly in places that have natural disasters and theft, and a variety of different issues, not just also, talking about the physical vulnerability of a computer itself. Cloud computing makes a lot of sense. Now, the negative side of it is when anything is out of your control, anything. I mean, this is a golden rule about data, going back to the earliest days of the internet, which is that as soon as you have data leave your hands and out of your office, you lose control of it. Now, not completely control. Obviously, there's passwords and I, two-step authentications and so on and so forth, and that's always helpful, but it's never going to be totally 100% foolproof. Anytime something gets out of your hands and you're using a third party to manage it, so a lot of it has to come up to what attorneys use for their diligence and finding out, doing the research necessary to make sure that they're using the best possible services for their money. And I'm not going to make a bunch of different recommendations during this particular talk. That's not what this is about. I'm trying to instead tune you into what's going on, and then you folks can do your own research to find out what's appropriate for your practice and for what you're doing over at your office. But of course, if I knew more about everybody's office, I'd be able to give them more of a recommendation. You can always contact me offline to outside of this talk, and I'd be happy to speak with you folks about how I can help with that particular issue at your office. So a lot of this information is meant to be generic and give you ideas of where to go to, and then more specific things make sense once I know your office, because everybody's at a different level, and some of the people listening here are part of firms, some people are solos, so I always have to walk that line and make sure people understand. But the thing about cloud computing is it is for everyone, and that's why in some way, in some form, whether you like it, you don't like it, the cloud is pretty much the way to go. That doesn't mean that you never have your own local copy of your information, and I always recommend that you have something that you can turn to offline if something happens. If you get disconnected from the internet, if you get knocked offline, you have to protect that stuff when you have it offline, and make sure that you resync it back up with the cloud once it gets back up. But I have my own local copies as well as what's on the cloud, and that is the safest way, I think, for you to have that data double backed up just in case something happens either way. Now, cloud-based solutions can improve security because they're always working on it 24/7 to keep their security up, make software updates easier, allow for secure access for firm information anywhere. Cybersecurity policies and incident response plans are really important to have. And that's one thing that more and more both law offices and just individual businesses that are on the internet or have internet access are doing, is that at least have written down a plan. What happens if your office gets hacked? Who is responsible for responding? Because if you don't have something like that in place, not only will you have a lot of problem justifying how you handle your cyber breach with your insurance company, but also you could be in some serious liability based on the GDPR, the Global Privacy Act that was set by uh, uh, European Union a number of years ago, and it's something that attorneys can be liable for if they let that kind of information go out and don't cover it. Law firms have European data and information, and other states too are now getting into the act, and California has a privacy act too that you could be in violation of if you don't make sure that you have these things categorized and a plan for what happens if your firm's data gets leaked out, if there's a breach of some type, and client's information is compromised, how you would respond to it and what you would do in that instance. And usually the idea there is that you've got to have something, by designating somebody and then saying how quickly, giving a timeline that shows how quickly you get involved in something like this, and how you would fix something like this, and what your steps are to get it done and to cover it, and to let clients know that their information has been compromised. Those are all really important things to have as part of your plan. And again, something that, if you haven't got something like that plan in place, really work on designating one and putting one together. And then according to this American Bar Association, too many firms lack robust cybersecurity policies and incident response plans. So that's the negative side, is that the ABA has looked into it and found how little attorneys really are ready for a possible breach. And when that happens, how they respond is always kind of at random, and it doesn't really bode well. And a lot of insurance companies are starting to ask and insist upon this too. So you want to be prepared with that. Let's discuss about the ABA meeting from 2023 and the resolutions 608 through 6010. And that is that in 608, the ABA urged Congress to enact legislation establishing a duty to implement reasonable cybersecurity for organizations, and urges Congress and the federal government to seek harmonization with existing cybersecurity laws, regulations, and frameworks, while also providing incentives and resources to enhance organizations and users' cybersecurity protections and resiliency. So that is an important thing for the ABA resolution, because it's the first time they've really been acting to talking to Congress in quite some time to implement a cybersecurity framework, and that the federal government should be the leader in making sure that we have the same laws going throughout the United States, which makes a lot of sense. You really stand back and say to yourself, isn't that how it is? But really, right now, it's much more of a framework thing. I mean, there is federal law about it, but there's also, most of the enforcement has been happening on a state level. And certainly people suing people on civil grounds in state courts, rather than it being all under the federal umbrella. And yet, the internet itself is something that, I mean, if you want to talk about something that's interstate commerce, probably never been anything more interstate commerce in the history of the world than the internet. That's what it's all about. So we're trying to fight a lot of the cybersecurity issues on a state by state level, when we really should be fighting it and dealing with it on a federal level the whole time. because it doesn't make sense to do cybersecurity on a on a piece by piece basis. You just get too many inconsistent results, and then you have lawsuits that indubitably are raised because you have different states with different laws, and which one comes out on top, and you usually wind up having to go to the federal government to ask for advice on this. And it's because the internet touches everybody. It really is something I think that should be much more federally dealt with, and the uniformity would help everybody, and so everyone would know exactly where they are on the same playing field, and then the laws being universal would be easier to enforce. That's my little soapbox moment. But I agree with Resolution 608. Resolution 609 urges organizations that design, develop, deploy, and use artificial intelligence systems and capabilities follow certain guidelines, which is, going to be very important going on in the future. Again, our technology isn't quite there yet, but I'll be explaining to you how we're not far away from a real, like, sea change in technology that will change things for us a lot of ways, like the way the introduction of the computer changed everything in, like, the 60s, 70s, going into the 80s. I think I'll talk about that technology coming up. And I think artificial intelligence now can't be done perfectly not perfectly. It's not going to be perfect because it's humans that make it, and the humans that make intelligence are always going to be flawed, because how can we make something that's truly better than ourselves? Is that really possible? I guess that's could be a whole hour discussion all to itself. But getting back to the idea is that artificial intelligence right now is still very, very barbaric to what it's going to be soon within our lifetimes. I think it's going to be really, really changed, artificial intelligence, and when the next level of technology comes in and the power that it presents, it's going to take time for us to figure out how to harness the new level of power that we get. And, of course, with all things human, when we get a huge level of power, it often is abused for very negative reasons. And if the huge level of power that we tap into is used for really bad reasons, then we might not ever get to use it for really good reasons. And I know I'm not trying to harp too philosophically on this, but I'm hoping we can figure out a way to use it for the good reasons first, before too many people use it for the bad reasons and, ruin everything for everybody. So see how that measures out. And that's why, Resolution 609 is there, is they want guidelines to be put in to make sure that when we do get it in place, it really doesn't overwhelm us. As soon as artificial intelligence meets up with the next level of computing power, computers will be more powerful than us. They already kind of are, but they really will be, as far as their ability to, like, determine their own, like, outcomes and not have us have to tell them what to do all the time. And it's going to be a real challenge. I mean, it's what we've always wanted as humans. We've always wanted to build the Frankenstein monster. We've always wanted to build the Sorcerer's Apprentice and have some kind of automaton do our bidding for us and do everything we were hoping for. That has been something that's been part of humanity from almost the earliest times. So it's not a shocking thing that we're getting close to being able to do that. So we worked so long on trying to do that, but we're not far from it, is what I'm saying. And that's why 609 is in there, is to try to help establish that idea that we shouldn't be doing much more with AI without trying to really control it now, or it will get out of control. Now, Resolution 610 urges law schools to incorporate cybersecurity and emerging technologies into their curriculum. So I think that that's hopefully something law firms will use, and hopefully some of them at law schools will use. Hopefully a few of them will give me a call, and I'm more than happy to help them out with any kind of planning they have. But you're going to see that it's going to be a more standard subject, and it's going to work its way into a lot of other subjects, even if it's not, even when it's not a standalone subject. And I knew it would be this way, but I knew it would be this way back in 1993. So it's a little bit too far ahead of the curve, but I'm glad to see the curve getting there, because it is a subject worth studying, and certainly a subject worth knowing a lot about if you care about the security of your information. So other trends in computer security include the growing importance of IoT security, including things like data breaches, which we talked about a little bit, and how you respond to that. We're seeing the expansion of remote work, and that, even though there's a lot of people that don't want to go back to work, there's certainly a lot more of the hybrid technology occurring, and you're seeing, like, especially in the legal business, a real like trend towards remote depositions, Zoom meetings for court appearances, a lot of things being done with remote technology, and being able to use that with the court. Most courts now have electronic filing systems and so forth, so you really don't have to keep a huge file system yourself, and the paper filing is beginning to go away. But that still means like accessing the court's website and being able to connect that way. You're seeing a lot of courts partnering up with two-way security apps for either the phone or the PC, that when you sign in, it also sends like a secondary message to your cell phone. You have to verify it there through an app on your cell phone for second level of security. And I've always kind of joked about the New York City door, apartment door lock situation, where you see on a lot of episodes where somebody has 4 or 5 different door locks, to really secure this door. And it's great, but if you want to go out and get something, you have to unlock 5 different locks, and then when you want to come back in, you have to unlock 5 different locks, and so and you have to remember each lock and how to unlock it, and so the concept is that there's always a balance between security and convenience. The more convenient something is, the less secure it's going to be. And the more secure something is, the less convenient it is. So when people, complain about passwords, and I have people, it's probably the number one thing I get as a attorney that works with other attorneys on computers. The number one thing I get complaints on is passwords. And they hate them, they forget them, they change them and never record them. They have certain, password management programs, which I use myself. I just use the Google one, because I use Google for everything else. If someone broke into my Google account, they have, not only they have all my passwords, they got everything else that I've got on there. So, I got to just make sure I keep that secure. So, but we when you have something along those lines, you've got that way to manage it. And kind of to wrap up the remote work concept is that you're just the trend is going to be towards not only being able to have your data should not be locked in one place. Your data should be something you can access no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing. Your computer shouldn't be where all your data is. It should be where you have a copy of your data, but it shouldn't be where all your data is. Because having it outside of your computer, having someone else manage it, someone you're paying to manage it, by the way, the free services are one thing, but then you really don't have the same kind of contractual liability and or professional level of responsibility that you get with the paid contract. And that's one thing. When you use something for free, you don't have a whole lot of they don't have a whole lot of responsibility back towards you. If you're paying money for it, you have a little bit different of an arrangement with them, and they have responsibilities to you to make sure they're paying to their level of contractual responsibility given the money that you're paying. And so that's why I've always said that too. But then you gotta make sure you keep paying them, because if you have something in the cloud, you stop paying that person in the cloud, that cloud can disappear in a moment, and then that can be a problem. So anyway, let's talk a little bit about the rise of quantum computing, because I think that's going to be the thing that changes everything for attorneys. Well, the rise of quantum computing, I will talk in the next slide after this. It's just a couple other quick things I wanted to mention. That is, there's an evolution of phishing attacks that is occurring, and they are getting more sophisticated. They're getting more clever. I mean, but sometimes they aren't so clever. They just call people up on the phone, and people wind up giving them access to their computer. I've had clients, unfortunately, sophisticated attorneys fall for that, where they get a message from Microsoft, quote unquote, from a website, blinking on their computer saying, your computer is infected, call this number. They call the number, they give access to the person over the phone who downloads something onto their computer. They go to a website, they download it, they give them access to it. And from that point, their lives are hell. And they've lost thousands of dollars, client information, you name it. It's a terrible thing. So you want to make sure that Microsoft never contacts you or tells you to call them. None of these agencies ever do. If you've got a reputable antivirus program, you should be looking to that program itself and knowing how it works to understand how it's sending you a message that there's something wrong versus something coming from the web. If you don't understand how to do that, don't act on it until you talk to someone that does, okay? That's a key thing, could save you thousands and thousands of dollars if you take that advice, all right? There's an emergence of automotive cybersecurity threats that the car computers that people have, there's no way to protect those things. So, not easily, because there's really no interface for the consumer to be able to update. Although there are updates offered for people's car systems, they often put them off or forget to do them. And it's important to do that, because the computer that's inside your car is like a computer that you have in your home. And now everyone's got their cars hooked up to the internet, basically, or somehow through Bluetooth on their phone. There's ways you can break into the car's computer and hack it the way that you can hack anything else. And that's obviously going to be a problem. Mobile devices is a growing target for cyber attacks, because most people don't have any kind of protection on their cell phones, don't use any kind of a VPN in public spaces, and they use the public internet for, all sorts of financial transactions. And then obviously cloud security challenges and solutions. Again, that in itself could be an easy topic for a full hour, that, that there's great classic technologies out there, but there's also challenges to them, and that there's people that are trying to hack them 24 hours a day. So being up 24 hours a day means you can be hacked 24 hours a day, and that's always a tremendous challenge. I also wanted to talk about the U.S. Legal Support did a survey to show how AI is dominating right now in law firms. In many legal technology conversations, they said that up to 43% of the respondents are somewhat familiar, but about 25% of the other respondents are either extremely familiar or very familiar. So it's really about almost 75% of the people who were talked to at the legal support survey said that they were very familiar to some extent with AI's reach. AI has many potential applications. So 21% of the respondents who are using AI technologies said they were using them for legal research, 19%, document management and automation, 15%, predictive analysis, 15%, and automation of routine tasks, 14%. Of those using AI, the benefits they've experienced was that efficiency for administrative tasks, resulting in increased billable time, 45%, reduced costs for 35%, enhanced client experience, 21%, and notably, 25% of the respondents said they expect the firm's use of AI technology to increase, and 46% of the respondents agree with the statement that AI tools will become mainstream in the legal profession the next 3 to 5 years. So if this was the first time you were hearing about AI, then it's about time, because it's really going to be a big part of your practice if you're working around in the next 3 to 5 years. So here are just some ideas of how the firms that use AI are safeguarding themselves. And for firms currently using AI, the safeguards they're including is they use human oversight for 38% of the time, training and education, 36%, processes to vet software vendors, 30%, and internal company policies, 21%. So the last two are big because it kind of gets us back around to what we were talking about with the internal company policies and vetting software vendors as part of that thing we were talking about with having a plan, having a cybersecurity plan, and having something in place to show what happens if things go wrong. These last two, vetting your software vendors through a process instead of just looking one up on the internet and then just saying, oh, I'll take that one. The more you can document and say, this is how we chose the cybersecurity professional partner, software, computers, whatever you have that is implementing the technology in your firm, the more you can show this is how we chose it, rather than I just went to the internet and bought something, as your excuse. You want something that says, well, I researched this, I found that this was rated best out of, X number of different reviews from, credited sources. I, had the person come and visit me and talk to me and, show me the demonstration of everything. And it seemed like something I understood, and I understood how it worked, and the explanation made sense. And it's something I can implement in my firm. So, we could afford it, and we ordered it, and it got installed, and everything seemed to work fine. Then you do all those things. You can say you've done your due diligence as an attorney, and that you've taken care of what they're expecting from you. It's when you just don't have a process, you don't have internal company policies, and you're quote unquote just winging it, which unfortunately a lot of attorneys do. That's when you get in trouble, when something bad happens. But I did hint earlier about the rise of quantum computing and its impact on cybersecurity. And if you haven't heard about quantum computing, or maybe you've heard about it, but it just doesn't really make sense, I'm going to try my best to explain it to you. But understand this: quantum computing in our lifetime will change things the way the original computers changed things. If we thought things were amazing with regular computers, quantum computers are going to blow us away. It's the concept is that you use a thing called a qubit. So instead of having ones and zeros, which is a bit, you have 4 of them. Okay. The problem that is really hard to understand about quantum computing is that the 4 bits exist all at the same time. Okay. And binary computing, instead of quantum, binary computing, you have 1 bit on or off, and that's it. Okay. In quantum computing, you have 4 of them all working at the same time, potentially. Okay. So what you're getting as far as power goes isn't just 4 times 1. It's on a level that's like, it's hard to give a pure mathematical explanation without, really blowing people, who aren't really big scientists away. But it's there's a reason why it's called quantum, and that we all understand that the word quantum means powerful. Okay, because it is. It's giving combinations and an ability to process. Once we get computers that truly process on a quantum level everywhere, it's going to make things so powerful that the things that we do now with the most powerful computers won't even be able to come close to what we can do with a quantum system. And it means that something that would take months for a regular computer to compute, and we have really powerful computers, to have something, process something in a month would be a gigantic amount of data, and a quantum computer will happen in just like a split second, maybe too fast for us to even comprehend how fast it happens. Or it could, once we know what we're doing with quantum type computing. So a password, for example, that, let's say, to crack a password, let's just say it's a 4-letter password, which would be too easy, but let's just say it's 4 letters. Well, you just go 1111, 1112, 1113, 1114. And obviously, if you're a computer, you do that really fast. Well, with a modern computer, like 128-bit encryption is kind of one of the better standards, and 256-bit encryption, meaning for every 1 character, you have 256 possible combinations for it when it gets encrypted. Okay. Well, for a quantum computer, 256-bit encryption, it can just run through that in a split second. No matter, even if the password were 1,000 characters long, it would still just be able to just go through each character, do 256 combinations, try each one for 1,000 characters at 256 different combinations for each character. It would just laugh at that, as far as like, oh, do you think that's going to be a hard challenge for me? It would just solve that and say, oh, okay, here's the password. It probably, as soon as you would ask it, what's the password for, this 1,000 character 256-bit encryption phrase, the quantum thing would say, oh, well, give me something hard. It's this, it's 1,000 characters, but here it is. You can copy and paste it if you want, you know. And so it means that any kind of security we have now, with any kind of computer we have now, is just going to be laughably unfit for security. So we're going to have to develop all new security to deal with this sort of thing. Now, the positive thing is that with quantum computing, we'll be able to think of compute even greater ways of protecting systems. But it's always a cat and mouse thing. It doesn't matter what kind of technology we have. It's always going to be the mouse exists first and then the mousetrap. It's never the other way around. You don't invent a trap before you have a problem. You have the problem first and then you have the trap for it. Because it's hard to think of every way something's going to fail. And as soon as there's a tiny hole somewhere, you're going to have, something get in. Or people that invented it put holes in there. And, sure, nobody else knows about it but them. But, at a bar somewhere, somebody gets drunk and brags about it, or they themselves get hacked and people find out their secrets. Or somebody reverse engineers it. There's just, wherever there's a lock, there's somebody who wants to make a key to it. I don't care what it is. Any lock anywhere. You find me, any lock in the middle of the desert, there's still somebody who's tried to break that lock open once. Because they just do. People want to see what's behind things. They want to go places they're not allowed to. And they think that if it's really well protected, and they're usually right, there's usually something in there that's of tremendous value. So that's always going to attract the criminal element. And it's always going to be up to whatever we develop as a computing source to combat that. And as attorneys, bringing it all back to you, you're going to need to understand this technology at some point in time, because it's going to run your practice. And it's going to be like the attorneys that refused computers, wanted to stay with typewriters, eventually had to use computers, and they got out of business. And attorneys that don't want to learn what quantum computing does, maybe they can last out the end of their practice. But then anyone that's new, that wants to practice the next 20 years, quantum computing is going to be an everyday part of what you do. And it's going to be great, but it's going to create new challenges, different challenges, and ones that are kind of harder to deal with computers. Now, if you think of where computers were in the 80s, what kind of real challenges were there with computers in the 80s? Almost no computers had viruses. The viruses were really rare. And, but computers couldn't do anything. They could just print things and maybe send a fax to somebody, even up until like the late 90s. Okay. You couldn't really do that much. You get on the internet and send email to people and maybe get some music from Napster. But other than that, there really wasn't the implications of everyday life and how people use a computer for everything they do now all the time, especially when you look at the connection that people have with their cell phones and you count a cell phone as a computer, which it really is, then yeah, it's a significant thing. But obviously quantum computing poses significant threats to cybersecurity protocols. Breaking encryption methods such as RSA and ECC can leave many security systems to be vulnerable. And then that means that we need to have quantum resistant encryption techniques, and that's called post-quantum cryptography. So if you want your kids to make a lot of money, teach them how to do post-quantum cryptography, which my twins are far from, but it's a little too late for them. But maybe your kids, or grandkids, if they're really young, you can start getting them start getting into this, and they'll have job security for life. I can tell you that much. Now, speaking of job security for life, as a computer consultant, I'm going to be very busy in the next year helping attorneys transition from Windows 10 to Windows 11, because unfortunately, the alarm bell is ringing on how long Windows 10 will be able to operate. And most people aren't really sure about this, but the truth is that Microsoft has announced that all versions of Windows 10 will no longer be supported after October 2025. That means that the operating system will no longer be updated. Security patches will no longer be issued. Lawyers who choose to use unsupported and unpatched operating systems should reread the ABA models of professional conduct on competency. And it said that most every state follows the ABA's updates from 2012, which suggests that the comment to maintain the requisite knowledge, skill, a lawyer must keep abreast of changes in the law and its practice, including the benefits and risks associated with relevant technology. And a lot of people are wondering why Microsoft would go away from Windows 10, which, to be honest with you, to be totally honest with you, I love Windows 10. I mean, I'm working great with, I still have, my machine is still Windows 10. I haven't transitioned to Windows 11 because also, like you'll find out, is that a lot of systems are not Windows 11 compatible. You can find out when you run a health check on it. And I'm just going to see what happens towards October, if they may extend out they have offered an extension, but it costs money. We'll talk about that in a second. But I'm curious to see what options there's going to be for Windows 11 as that deadline moves closer to October 2025. Right now, it's estimated that 70% of the PCs out there in the world are Windows 10, and that there is still a whole lot of computers that are not Windows 11 compatible. So let's see what happens with the sea change coming up. First thing too is that you want to see if can you upgrade, and is it worth time or the effort. The age of the machine matters. If you have something that's over 5 years old, it's not going to likely work with Windows 11, but you can check. You can go to PC Health Check online and from Microsoft and get it and download it and see if it can pass Windows 11. But usually most processors are just too old. If you didn't buy it in the last 3 or 4 years, most and you didn't buy something that was kind of high end, you're probably not going to be able to upgrade it to Windows 11. If your machine, you also have to think too, is all your other hardware going to be Windows 11 compatible? You need to check that too. Things like printers, scanners, cameras, and so forth, your other peripherals. So that's, I mean, a lot of things are compatible with Windows 11. It does have a really good software base to it of drivers built into it. And I have, in a couple of instances, installed things with a Windows 10 driver that weren't supposed to work on Windows 11. But when I ran the Windows 10 driver, it did work. So I wouldn't necessarily rule out something being incompatible with Windows 11. I mean, if you have something, you try. What I'm talking about is an old Fujitsu scanner that I managed to get work with a Windows 10 driver on Windows 11, even though it said it wasn't Windows 11 compatible. We were able to get it to work. So I don't know, it's kind of fun, but you know, it doesn't happen with everything. And a lot of things that I've tried that said that weren't Windows 11 compatible have not worked. So, or have some kind of error with them over time. So it's not really a great idea. We just didn't want to have to buy a new scanner for my client if she didn't have to get it. If upgrading is not an option, what will happen if you still will use Windows 10 after October 25th? You can purchase security updates. You have to have the business account though, and I think you have to be using the the Windows Professional version, not the home version. But it's not forever, and it's going to be like $70 a machine. So eventually, you they are going to stop that too. So you can only use it for a couple more years, and again, you'll have to pay each time you pay for more updates. The updates are going to be more expensive. I think it's like 68 one year, and then like 150 the next year, and then like 250 the next year. So you better be in love with your systems to want to pay that much for keeping them around. And by then, I'm telling you, your system will be like 13, 14 years old. And unless it's a really specialized system and there's something on it you can't possibly replicate on another computer, I'm not sure it's wise to, work with something that's that old. Yeah, but you run a very high professional risk of exposing your data and clients' data if you stay on Windows 10. And of course, it'll be malpractice if anything goes wrong. So just try to avoid that, and I think make a plan to consider, at least doing a review of your systems to see if they can handle a Windows 11 upgrade. And after that, if they can't, start making plans to transition your stuff over to the Windows 11 system, and B, how you will deal with all your old systems and making sure that they get cleared off and donated or recycled to a proper place. If you're buying a new machine, make sure you have a good consultant. Don't over purchase. Look for AI capable machines that are all the rage right now. Make sure you're utilizing the cloud to make the transition easier with your Windows 10 to Windows 11 transition. And then use this as a way to take inventory of your documentation, your information, who has what information where, and it's probably a good time to make sure everyone knows what their passwords are to everything and all that stuff. So that's important. So finally, some conclusions. Here's some top cybersecurity tips for attorneys, and sort of a summary of all the things that we've talked about, which is: one, conduct a risk assessment, see where the risks are coming from. Get law firm cybersecurity insurance if you can find it. It's not everywhere, but there are places that specialize in it. Develop a robust law firm cybersecurity policy and incident response plan. That is one I can't overemphasize, and it really is not being done enough by attorneys. So please do that. Use cybersecurity tools, and ones that have a good reputation, ones that you trust, that you've used for time, and then work with practice management professionals who prioritize security. So you want people that understand that you as an attorney have data that you don't want others to get a hold of, and that your professional license is at stake if there's something that goes wrong with any data loss. And I think this is the kind of thing too that is going to be an oncoming trend for people in general. I think that we're going to, as a society, start prioritizing and valuing security more, and being able to brag to clients and say, if you sign up with me, I'll make sure your data is secure. Not only am I a great professional and I'll deal with your case well and all this other stuff, but as an added level, they're going to brag about what kind of security score they have, and that they take this good care of your data, and that your data to them means as much to them as as your case. And I think that that's maybe where we're going to be headed. And it's something that obviously it's not something you would go right to your client with as the first part of your discussion with them, but I think if you can give your clients assurance that their data is being well handled, and even give them some idea of how you're making sure that their data, when they give it to you, is being safeguarded and not just being left on on a 3.5 inch floppy somewhere on top of a cooler. I think that the clients would appreciate that, know that also that you're staying on top of trends and that you're informing yourself on the latest things like cybersecurity, like we're talking about today. So if you want more information, the Clio company does have a great security response law firm newsletter that they have on their site, and it's easy to read and it's quick to read. And so I did put the link down there at the bottom. And really, if you have any other questions, this is my contact information, and you can send me an email or give me a call. And I do appreciate you folks listening today, and hope everyone has enjoyed this talk. And thank you very much for listening.